So the next one, a little more straightforward. Reference to a recorded plat, also referred to as the lot and block method. Okay, reference to a recorded plat, also referred to as the lot and block method. Folks, if you live in a subdivision, this is how your legal description is done up. This is a lot more common in urban properties, not in rural areas where it hasn't been crazy developed and you've got hundreds of acres. You're not going to see this. And so what happens is a developer will go in and buy a piece of land, and then they will have a civil engineer and a surveyor draw them a map as they develop it. And then that map will be recorded at the Register of Deeds. And when they do that, now they can just refer back to it. They can say, well, all of Lot 1 on scene of that map for Rolling Acre Subdivision Phase 1. So they refer to this map, and it's so super simple and straightforward. So you're getting all of Lot 1 on that map. That's what it is. We're just referring back to that map that is recorded in the public record. Now, understand that when we're recording deeds and we're recording plat maps, they are always done at the Register of Deeds in the county they are located in. I gave you a little bit of a lesson on the Register of Deeds yesterday, and I told you it's at the county courthouse. It's a physical place. Yeah, there's digital records that you can look up, but the Register of Deeds is a physical place at the county courthouse where you record these documents. And so here's just an overly simplistic example of it. It would be a picture. The picture is typically more defined, right? It would say the dimensions of the lots. It would say if there's any easements. But this picture would be recorded at the Register of Deeds. And so if we were transferring ownership of Lot 4 to somebody, you know, being all of Lot 4 on Block B of Rolling Acre Subdivision as seen in Book of Maps 17, page 700 at the Johnston County Register of Deeds. So if you go look it up, you can see that map, you can see what you're getting. Pretty straightforward. And the last one is reference to a recorded deed. And we're going to talk about deeds a little bit more here in a minute, but deeds are required to contain a legal description. So the reason why the reference to a recorded deed works is kind of the transitive property. If you refer to this deed and this deed refers to the property in another legal description, you've technically referred to the property. So what the deeds will typically contain is reference to a recorded plat or a meets and bounds legal description. So we can say, being all of the property as described on this deed. And when we say that, you go look at that deed, you see the other legal description, we know which property you're talking about. I'm going to show you an example of this here in a little bit. But so if we're referring to the recorded deed, you know, you got to understand there's like a catalog system, right? They categorize this stuff. And so it would say, you know, being all the property mentioned on deed book 2132, page 541 of the Johnston County Registry. So let me show you a couple of things to help them click in your mind, folks. This is a copy of a deed. And so first thing I'm going to point out is what we're presently talking about. If you look down here at the bottom, it says see Exhibit A attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Here is Exhibit A. Take a look at Exhibit A and tell me what that is.
Legal description.
Be more specific.
Government, whatever the word is, survey system.
Nope. Jack got it. It is the meets and bounds legal description, folks. There's not townships. There's not sections. It is minutes, degrees, directions, right? The list of words. So point of beginning at a stake in the center of SR 1531, a corner with lot number 1. There's your point of beginning. Runs thence along the line of lot number 1, north 46 degrees, 45 minutes west. Those are compass bearings. And you're going to go 1,083 feet. That's your bounds. That's your meets. Which direction are you going and how far? These are your individual calls. And so lot 3 runs along the line of this, goes here. And so that is a meets and bounds legal description. And so this is on a deed. So when we're referring to a recorded deed, if you look at the deed, you see this description. That's what I'm telling you. You can just refer to the deed because it's got some other type of legal description on it. Now let me show you a couple other interesting things. I can't show you everything on the deed yet because I haven't taught it all to you yet, but let me show you a few things. First and foremost, name's the grantor, name's the grantee. And the grantee, I blocked out the names. It's not super consequential because they're public record, but a 1/2 undivided interest and a 1/2 undivided interest as tenants in common. You've heard that before. Undivided interest. That means they both have free and clear access to the property. It's undivided. Let me tell you what else you've heard before. Fee simple. Fee simple. I told you same as fee simple absolute. Highest and best form of ownership. So they will receive title fee simple, aka fee simple absolute. Now, I said they will receive title even though it looks like it's already happened. Here's why I said that. Subject to the life estate of the grantors, which is reserved herein. Folks, this is a conventional life estate. The owners of this property recorded a deed, and what they've actually done is they've named these two people as remainder men who will receive half interest as tenants in common, fee simple absolute, at the time that they die. So this will bypass probate. This is a real example of a conventional life estate, naming remainder man, and having tenancy in common all in one. So the second that both of those people die, it belongs to the two people named under grantee. Do they own it right now? No. The grantors do. But this deed will bypass probate. So the second they die, it will become the grantee's property. Now, there's a couple other interesting things on the deed, and I may come back and show them to you in a minute, but I haven't taught them to you yet, so I don't really want to point them out at the time, because cart before the horse kind of thing. So, let's get into the deed discussions, now that we've looked at a deed. And so this is the other kind of like weird thing that I talked about. And I've already said this time and time again. This is just reiterating it. There is no such thing as a title, right? The deed is the document that shows the transfer of title, but title is this concept of ownership. If you are said to hold title, it is presumed that you are the owner. I'll get more into that in a second. Okay, the deed is just this evidence that this title is transferred from one party to another party, grantor to grantee. And of course, as I told you, when we're dealing with transferring title to somebody, it's not enough to use the street address solely. Do we use it? Yes. But I told you that the street address is referred to as an informal reference. And so we have to typically use in conjunction with one of these other legal descriptions so there's no confusion about which property we're referring to. Now, I did mention this as well in previous discussions, at least loosely when we talked about encroachments. A property survey done by a licensed surveyor would be the way that you would discover any boundary issues, any encroachments, some title issues, things of that nature. Of course, surveyors are also the ones that can go out and find your property boundaries if you were interested in like building a fence or something like that. And so that's what I told you. A legal description is considered to be adequate when a surveyor can go out and find the property. Now, one interesting thing about property surveys, and I will mention this again probably before the end of the night, because it may not make 100% sense yet. There is something called title insurance that most people get when they're buying properties. And so it is insurance that covers the concept of ownership. I know that's kind of an abstract thought right now. And basically, the reason why property surveys are a big discussion with title insurance is you are not required to have a property survey. In North Carolina, it's not required. But if you elect to not have a survey and there is a major title defect that could have been and would have been discovered by a survey, your title insurance company is not going to cover that title defect if you did not have the survey. Kind of a consequential thing there. So we're about to get into the transfer of title chapter, but let me go over one more thing before we get there. And bad news, it's math again. Good news, it's easier math. Easier math, okay? Hopefully easier math. I want you to take a look at this piece of property right here. Bill says, what if a survey is already on record? Surveys are not recorded. Surveys are private property, right? When you order one, you have a copy of it, but that is only good for you. We like to see them, we like to look at them, but it is only good for you, the person who had it done. That one will not protect the next person for the title insurance company's sake, and they do not record surveys. They record plat maps and, professional surveys, but yeah, not the individual ones. Good question. So if you look at this parcel of land, folks, let's talk about a couple different aspects of this, okay? This piece of land is running along a road, okay? And why is that important? Because there is this very common concept in real estate called front feet. In other words, how many linear feet are running along the front of something? In this case, you've got 150 front feet of road frontage. Could be street frontage, could be water frontage, folks. Lake frontage. Sometimes things are way more valuable based on the front foot. Have you ever seen a McDonald's back behind 72 things that you can never get to or never see, right? They're always right there on the road front. Same thing with shopping centers. They love to have road frontage. So let me give you an example of why this is important, folks. Imagine that we have this beachfront property, right? Beautiful waves. I'm an artist. You're welcome. And we had two properties that were the exact same size square footage wise or acreage wise. Property A, property B. Same acreage. Which do you think is more valuable if this is the ocean right here? There you go. A. Of course, the one that has all this ocean frontage is going to be more valuable. And so, while that is never a single deciding factor of what we're going to value a property on, sometimes that is a consideration. And so, I'll tell you a funny story. If I was to say that this property right here, this green one, sold for $800,000, and I asked, well, what did it sell for per front foot? You're literally just going to take 800,000 and divide it by 150 feet. That's it. If I say, how much did it sell for per front foot? If this is what it sold for, how much did it sell per front foot? That's it. And I'll never forget it. I had a student, and he was the one that's in some of those videos. Great student, asked really good questions, but I just remember we went on like a 30-minute, me trying to explain this to him at the beginning of class one day, because he's like, well, I don't understand. Why would they just value it based on front foot? There's more to it than just the front foot. Yes, I know. But that's not what the question's asking. We're just saying, what would it have been charged per front foot if it had sold for this? You've just got to understand, if we ask you to do the math, do the math. Are we ever valuing a property solely based on front foot? No, not typically. But we will typically add value to it because of the front footage. So hopefully you're all with me there. The other thing to understand, if we were talking about total linear running feet, we're just talking about the perimeter, right? 150, 50, 150, 50. So in this instance, you would have 400 linear running feet throughout the perimeter of this piece of property. And we talked about it a little bit already, but when we're dealing with area calculations, folks, there is squares and rectangles that are just length times width. Please understand what it really is, though, is just one side times one side. Don't ever get so caught up with the word length and width. If I told you the width and the depth, it's the same thing, isn't it? Same thing. So in this instance, if I say, what's the area of this parcel of land? 150 times 50 gives us our 7,500 square feet. And then we took it a step further and we said, well, how many acres is that? That's where you divide by our magic number, 43,560, or 0.17 acres. Now, understand that houses are measured the exact same way. It's just that when we're dealing with land, if it was like a rectangular lot, we typically refer to land in acres. Folks, have you ever seen a house advertised on Zillow, right? 0.17 acre home. Like, not the lot, but the home, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 0.17 of an acre inside. You've never seen that, have you? Yeah, it doesn't happen. So, if we were dealing with lots, you're going to typically utilize acreage. So, if we give you the square feet, we're going to say, well, how many acres is that? And if we're dealing with a house, we're just going to leave it as square feet. But the measurements are the same. If I was calculating the square footage of a rectangular house versus the square footage of a rectangular lot, same calculations. Let me introduce something else, though. Because we don't only deal with squares and rectangles. We also deal with triangles. Who remembers the calculation for area of a triangle? Page, that look is priceless.
Base times height.
Say it again.
Base times height.
More than that.
Base times height divided by 2.
That's it. It is 1/2 base times height, or in other words, base times height divided by 2. So what a lot of people do is they'll do like 1/2 base times height. In other words, what we're saying is what Tara just said. Base times height divided by 2. Folks, let me explain why it's that. Okay, I want you to take a look at this rectangle. If I was to draw a line from here to here, what did I just do?
Made a rectangle.
Made a triangle. Yeah, there you go. It's okay. Listen, you got the formula right, Tara. We'll give you that. It's okay. Made 2 equal triangles. Everybody agree? So if you just did base times height, what you're finding is the area of a rectangle. But if you do base times height divided by 2, that's your triangle. Everybody see how that works? So if I said, what is the area of this triangular lot? It is 50 times 150. You got to hit equals first because of the order of operations, divided by 2. 3,750 square feet for that one triangle. Now let's take it a step further, folks. Imagine that I was talking about a house, because I told you we could potentially be calculating both. And I told you that a house had this really fancy thing off the side of it. Now in real estate, we call this a bay window. Who remembers in geometry land what you call that shape? There you go. A trapezoid. Now, folks, listen to me. There is a formula for calculating the area of a trapezoid. Listen very carefully. Don't nobody need that negativity in their life. You know what a trapezoid is?
A rectangle and 2 triangles.
Bam. A rectangle and 2 triangles. So if I said this is 6, this is 10, and this is 3, we would just break it piece by piece, folks. This is a rectangle that is 6 by 3 for 18 square feet in that rectangle. Now this is 6, that means this is also 6, and so you've got 2 here, 2 here. So now your triangles are 2 times 3 divided by 2. So each one is 3 square feet. You see how that works? It's a heck of a lot easier than knowing the formula for area of a trapezoid. Told you, nobody need that negativity. So I will probably give you a couple of these to practice because they do get a lot harder than this, folks. But just having a basic understanding of this is, of course, the starting point. And when I say harder, I mean, there's some that get into like cubic stuff, and there's some that get into yards, and we're not going to go there tonight, but I will show you some practice ones that we can look at. But the area calculations math is typically some of the easier math in the course. So let's just practice a couple of these math concepts. If you look in the math packet that we introduced last night, there is a section for this as well. Has the formula calculations for the different pieces, and of course there's videos for this as well. I'm not going to do a lot. Let's just go ahead and jump into... let's do number 4. Tackle that one for me, and if you're feeling good about that one, I'll do like 1 or 2 more, and then we'll move on. So, real quick for this one, got to pay attention just like with any other question. You've got to realize that it is a triangular lot. So how many acres in a triangular lot with a base of 250 and a height of 300? And if you need a visual, right, just draw it out. Base of 250, height of 300, and it is 1/2 base times height. Or in other words, base times height divided by 2. So 250 times 300 divided by 2, but that's not the answer because we want how many acres, and that is your square footage. So now you need to divide by your magic number, 43,560, or 0.86 acres. Just do 2 more. Try number 6 out there. So, of course, this is what you would refer to as a multi-step math problem. A lot of these end up being that. So what is the cost of a lot 200 feet by 400 feet at a cost of 25,000 an acre? First things first, take your 200 feet multiplied by 400 to get 80,000 square feet. 80,000 square feet divided by 43,560 gives us the acreage, and then your acreage times your $25,000 per acre. 45,913.68, depending on how you round it. Now, just for clarification purposes, folks, this worksheet is based on 3 decimal places. So technically, when you're doing the math, like I just left it in the calculator. If you look at the answer key, it probably gives you a slightly different answer if you didn't break it down to 3 decimal places. So it does say up at the top of this math packet to do all your math calculations to right there. 3 decimal places. And so if you ever find like one's a little bit off, it's just based on rounding. Don't panic. I told you it'll never come down to rounding on the test. Let me throw one more at you just to kind of circle back around to something that I've already said. The one right underneath that one that we just did. And then I'll just explain a couple things and then we'll move on. This one right here. Cynthia, you talking to me?
Yeah, can you repeat that the calculation one more time? I lost the number. The last question.
The answer to it?
Yeah, can you do it one more time for the calculator? 200 to 400 and 8,000.
Yes. For this last one, it was 200 feet times 400 feet gives us 80,000 square feet. 80,000 square feet divided by 43,560, which is how many square feet are in an acre. So you've got 1.83 acres, and then you multiply that by your price per acre.
Okay, 459. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, for this one, and this is why I kind of gave you this example, and I kind of warned you about it. Property sold for $650,000, has a width of 125 feet, a depth of 400 feet. Well, folks, that word depth right there tells us how deep the property is. And so that means that the width is road frontage, because if we're not giving you any other information, if it's 125 feet wide, 400 feet deep, your road frontage is that number right there. So all we're asking is, well, what did it sell for? What was the cost per front foot? If we just wanted to know if it was purely based on front frontage, what was the cost per front foot? And that's where I said, just takes your $650,000 and divide it by the amount of front feet. That's it. $5,200 front foot. Now, of course, the complexity level does go up because I told you they start introducing things like cubic. If you don't remember cubic, of course, that is three-dimensional, right? If you're dealing with something three-dimensional, not just from a flat plane kind of thing, right? You got your building, your, cube, whatever it is. You would do length times width times height to get your cubic footage. And so then if you got a question like this, it's wanting to know like what it costs based on usable cubic feet. And so if this building is 87 feet by 150 feet and then 18 feet high, but then what they say is there's plumbing and HVAC that detracts from the usable square footage by 2 feet. So what you've really done is you've lost some at the top, and so then it's going to be 16. So length times width times height gives you your cubic feet, and then you would just multiply that by your $4 per usable cubic foot. The other thing that gets a little bit confusing is yards, especially cubic yards, which is a very common measurement for concrete. If you're not familiar with yards, there are 3 feet to a yard, and so it's hard for a lot of people to comprehend that if I say 1 cubic yard, that'd be the same as saying 3 times 3 times 3, 27 cubic feet. 1 cubic yard is equivalent to 27 cubic feet because there are 3 feet in a yard. So that's that kind of like conversion piece. And I do have, I think, the work through for a lot of these on those videos that we were talking about as well. So hopefully everybody's feeling okay-ish for the introductory of the area calculations and the numbers you got to memorize, the 43,560, things of that nature. So let me, is everything multiple choice in the class slash state exam? Nope, all short essay questions. Every single one of them, short essay. In fact, some of them are actually a game of Pictionary. And the last few are charades. And if I can't guess it, then you get 0 points. They're all multiple choice. They're all multiple choice. That'd be fun, though. I wish I could make it like Pictionary. Wouldn't work. What you got, Savannah?
Does this fall into one of the 7 math questions?
Yes.
Or are these, like, not in that?
Yeah, they are. Now, I mean, there's more than 7 math concepts, so when it comes to the test, like, you may see some and not others, so, but this would potentially fall into one of the 7 math questions if you get this kind of math on the test.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a couple questions here. When calculating the area of a rectangle, you would multiply the blank of the lot by the blank of the lot to find the area. What is it?
Length times width.
Length times width. And we don't really care what you call it, right? Width times depth. Width times length. Just one side by one side, right? Don't get so caught up on those words, length and width. That's right. Basic units are townships that are blank miles square. So how many miles square is a township? There you go, Brooks. There you go. 6 miles square, which of course contains 36 square miles. I say 6 miles square, and that's what Bridge and I were talking about. You're basically saying 6 miles squared, which would be 6 miles times 6 miles, or 36 square miles. But 6 miles by 6 miles square for your townships, and they contain how many sections? There you go. 36. take it a step further. Each section is how many square miles? 1. And how many acres is in that one section? There you go. 640. And there are how many square feet in an acre? It's almost like you knew that was my next question. How did y'all know? It's like magic. I don't know. Y'all are sharp. I like it. 43,560. That's right. Real short little vocab list before we get into the transfer of title in more detail. Meets and bounds, of course, I told you, identified by monuments, minutes, degrees, calls, point of beginning, all that fun-filled jazz. Townships and sections are part of the government survey system, also sometimes called the rectangular survey system. And then, of course, we had a reference to recorded plat and the reference to recorded deed as different methods of legal descriptions as well. So let's go ahead and rip the Band-Aid on this transfer of title. I've said it. Okay, title is this concept of ownership, and we show the transfer of this title, this concept of ownership, by way of a deed. Okay, deed is the actual document that represents that transfer of title, that bundle of legal rights, the land ownership, and everything that goes with it. Okay, so I'm not really going to leave these slides up. We've already hit this time and time again. This is just reinforcing this before we take it a step further. Same thing here. There is no such thing as a title. It's a concept of ownership. So, when we're talking about ownership, it is the rights to the land, that bundle of legal rights, all of the things that we've kind of been talking about, the appurtenances, the improvements thereon, right? Some very specific legal jargon in the word of real estate. And so, I've used this word once or twice, but I hadn't fully explained it yet. When you own a property and you remove yourself from that ownership, we use the word alienation. Alienation is just a fancy word for to remove yourself from. Okay? Alienation. So when you are removing yourself from your ownership, we call it alienation. And this alienation could be voluntary or involuntary, just like liens could be voluntary or involuntary. Yet again, voluntary means you chose to do it. Involuntary means you didn't choose to. Folks, what do you think the most common way that you voluntarily choose to remove yourself from the ownership of a property is? Yeah.
You think I will it?
Sell it, will it, arguably. We're going to talk more about willing in a second, but sell it or gift it, all right? The two most common ways of voluntarily alienating yourself from a property. Of course, selling being the most common. So when we talk about involuntary alienation, you have to understand there are ways that you are removed from your ownership of the property without your say-so. And I'm not even, like, we wouldn't even really group the things that we talked about, well, like the defeasible fee estates, you know, in here. There's others where people just forcibly take it, right? The other one's like, well, you messed up because you didn't follow the rules. This is ways that people can take or end up with your property. It's called involuntary alienation. And so when we are dealing with voluntary alienation, you're selling it, you're gifting it, you're choosing to do it. This all happens, you know, with deeds. And typically there are contracts that are the precursor to the deed. And as we've said, the person giving the property is referred to as the grantor. The person getting the property is referred to as the grantee. Now, important to note, and we're going to go into it a little bit more in a second, only the grantor has to sign the deed. The grantee does not. If you've ever purchased a house, you signed a lot of documents. The deed was not one of them. Most of the documents you signed was lending paperwork. So only the grantor has to sign the deed. And as I said, and we're going to talk about this many, many times, there is no such thing as just one deed, right? There is a new deed every single time there's a new conveyance. So there's multiple deeds over the history of a property. Now, a second ago, you said by will, right? Like if you die and you leave a property to somebody. This is another one of those weird things, kind of like riparian rights. If you were to look it up, some resources would tell you that dying and leaving a property to somebody would be involuntary. Other resources would tell you that it's voluntary. I argue it's more voluntary than anything because you chose who the property was going to in your will. What you didn't choose, unless it was intentional, was when you died. And so it's kind of like that gray area of it's not really voluntary or involuntary. It's kind of on its own little island. But if you had to pick one, I'd say go with voluntary. Now, we talked about this in the estate section of the conventional life estates, the concurrent ownership section. When you die with a will in place, that is called dying testate. The word is testate. That means you died with a will. And then, of course, that will all go through probate, and as long as it can be adhered to, it will be. But, of course, we talked about different scenarios where the will would be ignored if it was superseded by some other factors like right of survivorship or conventional life estates. If you die without a will, it is called dying intestate. Without a will, intestate. And I told you, North Carolina and many other states have what's called a law of intestate succession, which is basically where they will write a will for you if you die without one. And they'll say, okay, well, if you have this person, they get this. If you don't have that person, this person gets it, so on and so forth. I told you about 6 or 7 degrees down. You don't need to know how many and who the exact people are. And so let's talk about the different types of involuntary alienation, okay? Because they're going to be testable. Less common in the real world, but definitely testable for sure. So when we're dealing with involuntary alienation, the most common form of involuntary alienation is a foreclosure. We talked about the specific liens that attach to the property. And if you don't pay the bank, you default in any way, shape, or form, they can force the sale of your property. They are forcing the sale out from under you, and they're giving the ownership to somebody else. So a specific lien foreclosure is the most common type of involuntary alienation. Sold out from under you because you didn't follow what you were supposed to do with the bank's agreement. Now here's where I told you I was going to formally introduce adverse possession. Remember, we talked about easements as type of encumbrances, and there was one specific way that easements could be formed called a prescriptive easement, or an easement by prescription. And I told you, you've got to be very careful because the criteria for the easement by prescription and adverse possession is the exact same. Remember, what is an easement by definition? What is an easement?
Right to use.
There you go. The right to use the property of another. See the giant significant difference. We're talking about right now, involuntary alienation means you are removing somebody from their ownership in its entirety. And so criteria being the exact same, prescriptive easement says I should get to continue using it because I met this criteria. Adverse possession says I should get to own it because I met this criteria. And that criteria was OCEAN, open, continuous, exclusive, adverse, and notorious. And the period of time is also the same. In North Carolina, 20 years. Now, I said not all states recognize this, and not all states are 20 years. But it is the same for both in North Carolina. What you got, Brooks?
What was the other part we covered last night that had OCEAN in it?
That the easement by prescription, or prescriptive easement. Yep. So let me give you an example of this, folks. And we're not going to go down any more rabbit holes because the thing is, you have to understand that when I teach this class, everybody is very fascinated by this law that says you can steal somebody's property. Okay? But it is such an antiquated law. It is very seldom ever going to happen, folks. 20 years is a long time. Some of you are barely older than that, if that. Right? That's a long time. And so the likelihood of this being pulled off is slim to nada, all right? So let me give you an example of how this could happen. Let's not go down any rabbit holes here, okay? I'm just going to give you one example. Imagine that you had a neighbor who was an elderly lady, and you were very good friends with your neighbor, and you helped look after her. You had a key to her house because she didn't really have any family, and y'all became close. And as years went on, you know, you would help her feed her cats and take care of her and check on her. And then eventually she passed away. And let's say that you go to the funeral and none of her family show up or only a couple show up or whatever. And so, you know, you just imagine now that she's passed, you're going to get new neighbors. Nobody shows up. And so the grass starts getting overgrown and you start mowing it. And then you decide to use your key and you go in there and you turn off all the lights and check on things, make sure none of the water's running. And then It's been a year or two and nobody has come and done anything. So you just start living there. You start treating it as your own. You start doing it. You start meeting all these criteria, and nobody ever shows up and nobody ever stops you, and you just keep doing it. Now imagine 22 years later, somebody shows up and knocks on the door and says, "Who the heck are you?" And you're going to say, "Well, it's been 22 years, right? You're like, "I live here. Who are you?" And they're going to be like, "I'm such and such. This is my mother's house," right? But it's been 22 years. You can go to court and you can get this ownership of this house given to you by way of adverse possession because you've met all these criteria. But you understand that you were initially trespassing. But at the end of the day, that's not the thing that's at question here. It's, can you steal this property? And the answer is yes. You have to understand that this is not a new thing, and it's not a common thing. Folks, a lot of laws and rules have been around in North Carolina for a while, and some of them have evolved and some of them have stayed. So I like to help you think of this as kind of like an antiquated rule. Because we're on the East Coast, right? We're some of the original colonizations. And at a certain point, people started traveling out west, right? Folks, you ever play that game Oregon Trail when you were kids? You know what I'm talking about? Uh-huh. Yeah, where every single time you played it, you died from a rattlesnake bite or like sepsis or jaundice or something like that. Folks, sometimes people left the East Coast back in the day to go to the West Coast, and they didn't even make it to the West Coast. They're not coming back for their property. And so the whole point of this is the government's like, well, if nobody owns it, we're not getting taxes. So this rule basically exists for if somebody abandons a property, you can steal it. You can steal it so that now somebody owns it and now somebody will pay taxes. Is this something that's a common practice? No. Because most people would know if you showed up on their property. But of course, this is a bigger risk for more rural areas and places where people have owned a lot of land for a long period of time and haven't done anything with it. But like I said, don't get excited about it. It's a very seldom done thing in any way, shape, or form. I'll give you another real world example. Friend of mine, acquaintance, had a property in the back of a cul-de-sac. And at the back of his house, right at the back of the cul-de-sac, his lot was right here, and back behind his lot, all of this was like HOA owned land. And so he had a trampoline that he had sitting right there, and he lived in this house for over 20 years, and he eventually went to sell it. And he'd heard of this law, so he picked up the phone, he called an attorney, he said, "Hey, listen, I've kind of been using that, I kind of mow it, I kind of treat it as my own, and the HOA has never stopped me or said anything about it. Could I steal this by way of adverse possession?" And the attorney said, "Absolutely, but the amount of value you would gain would not come anywhere close to the court cost and the defense that you would have to provide to try to steal it. It's not worth your time. Give it up." It's just not worth it because you bear the burden of proving that you meet all these criteria. And then, of course, there's major legal fees because it has to go through a suit to quiet title where the HOA is allowed to defend their claim and try to prove that you didn't meet the criteria. It's just a thing, right? It's just know what it is. Don't get excited about it, okay? Oh, Lord have mercy, Chelsea. You would say that, wouldn't you? You've been so quiet this entire time, and you're the one that's going to bring that up? There's always one in the bunch, Chelsea. Now I know which type of person you are. Okay, for shame, Chelsea. Chelsea's question is, folks, good God. Chelsea's question is, can you take ownership of the property by paying their delinquent taxes? Please don't ever listen to anything you hear on TikTok. Is there some validity to that? Yes. There are some states that recognize under statutory periods that if you start paying delinquent taxes on people's property after a statutory period of time, you could potentially take possession of the property. But there's two big considerations. Number one, there's a statutory period and all that person has to do is pay you back those taxes and stop it from ever happening. Number two, even if that is something that's applicable in the given state, you would be taking it subject to all the other liens. I told you liens are pertinent too. So if there's still a lien from the bank that says the bank has owed $700,000 on that property and you take ownership of it, the bank can still foreclose. So you would want to make sure you did a very thorough title search. Is it a thing that can happen in some municipalities? Yes. Is it yet again a common thing? No. But because it is it's kind of like wholesaling, right? Everybody on TikTok, you can go this and you can get investment properties by paying a tax bill. It's not that simple. Same thing with wholesaling, not that simple. But is it a thing? Sure. Chelsea, in some municipalities. Lord. I'm just picking on you, Chelsea.
Probably will try your 85 acres.
Say what?
Probably will try your 85 acres, Georgia.
Oh, yeah, you go right ahead. You give it a shot. I just got my tax bill today, Synthel. It's fun stuff. Yeah. Don't worry. I pay my taxes, okay? You leave my property alone. That's right. What you got, Raphael?
At one point I heard some guy was living in a place where there was, I'm not sure which state though, but it was back in 2008, I guess, when, you know, it was crazy with foreclosure and stuff. So this guy was living in this place. It was a really nice neighborhood, and he noticed a house that was empty. Apparently, like, whoever was there before didn't pay the mortgage. They got thrown out by the bank. Then the bank itself went out of business. So no one was actually looking for that property. So this guy started living there, and then the neighbors started like trying to fight the guy to get the guy out of there, because it would devalue the properties around. So I don't know if you ever heard such a story, like, you know.
I've heard plenty of stories, but some of them are crazy, some of them are nutty, some of them are valid, some of them are everything in between. And that's where, you know, we just got to take this section with a grain of salt. I mean, these kinds of things do happen, and of course there's, you know, squatters' rights and people trespassing and people not leaving the property. I don't know if y'all heard, just a couple months ago, there was a lady in Raleigh who went and recorded a falsified deed trying to take ownership of a multi-million-dollar, yeah, some of y'all heard that story, multi-million-dollar home in North Raleigh. And she went to jail. That was illegal because when she recorded that deed, it was obtaining property under false pretense. And she's like, well, I thought nobody was living there. And of course, a lot of my attorney friends were like, it's not really worth the paper it's written on. Anybody can go down to the Register of Deeds and record things. But when a title search was to happen, there was no validity to the deed. And so, you know, other people were saying that that guy was going to have to go through a suit to quiet title to get it removed, and it was going to cost him thousands of dollars. I don't know which is true. But, you know, there's a lot of squirrely things, but that's why we have attorneys, and that's why we have title searches. And, you know, every state's laws are kind of different in that regard, but it does happen. There was actually another story that I heard, you know, probably a year and a half ago, where some lady did end up getting granted a whole house by way of adverse possession in some state. I don't remember the exact thing that was behind it, but she met the criteria. So it does happen. But good luck starting now. 20 years from now is 2044. Okay. What you got, Brooks?
So, just by hearing all these stories, why? And maybe you do know the answer, maybe you don't. It's fine if you don't. I can find out. Why is some Joe Blow off the street able to come register a deed without anything being confirmed by the Register of Deeds? Isn't that falling short of their mandate?
So that was the exact same question that a lot of my real estate friends had. We're like, well, what the hell's the point of them existing if they don't check into anything? And apparently, now here's the thing. You can't, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, you can't record anything in the Register of Deeds unless it's been notarized. But they also aren't going to call up the notary and verify it. So I don't know if this lady was a notary herself and notarized it herself, or if she paid somebody to falsely notarize it, because what should happen when you're recording a deed, the grantor is supposed to sign it, and a notary would witness that grantor signing it and check their IDs to verify it's them, and then notarize it stating, I saw the grantor sign this. So the Register of Deeds is just going to look for the notarization on there, and if they see that, they're going to record it. They don't research, they don't do. That would be, you know, a title defect, and title defects are more common than you think. So you can record anything, it just may or may not have any validity. But they don't do that research that often, to that extent. But I agree with you. I'm like, well, can we change that? Can we do something about this? Because it just seems really stupid that this lady could just walk and be like, I own this house now. Even though she didn't, like, it just, I don't know.
But for our jobs, if this was to happen, we have a buyer that's trying to buy the house from this lady. Say nobody ever found out, and she was in the house, but she bought it with a fake, via fraud, whatever. The attorneys that works with us, they would find that out already, though, right? Like, we would not be able to sell a house that was purchased fraudulent, right?
I'm gonna answer that question with one more story, and then we'll move on, because we could get really rabbit holey on this all day. There was another news story last year about a man who owned a property in his hometown, and he had moved away. And he got a call from his buddy one day, and he said, "Hey man, did you sell that property that you own where you said you were always going to build something?" He's like, "No, I still own it, and I'm still planning to build on it." He said, "No, you're not. Somebody's building a multi-million-dollar house on your property." He said, "What?" So he came home to find that there was a home being built on the property that he owned. And somebody did exactly that. They falsified documents stating that they were the owner, pretended to be the owner, sold that property to a builder. The builder closed on it, and the builder started building a home. And so now this builder had invested $800,000 worth of materials on a home that they got under fraudulent pretenses that they didn't know about. And I'm sure there was somebody who got sued, because attorneys are supposed to check IDs. So how did it get to closing without attorneys checking IDs and confirming these people? But the thing is, this crap does happen. That's why we're going to teach you all about title defects. I'm not going to say that it can't. It can, and it has. Folks, real estate brings out the crazies. It's not if, it's when. When you get your license, you will eventually meet somebody who's trying to sell a house they don't own. It's a brother, a sister, a tenant. It's a somebody that brings out the crazies, okay? I'm telling you. Buckle up, buttercups. You will meet the crazies in real estate. You sure will. Now, let me explain this last little piece here, what we call color of title. Folks, let me use my property in Georgia that Synthil's trying to steal, okay? The way that all that, he's like, I'm watching. The way that that was all worded, I told you that the big parcel of property with a house on it went to 8 different people before I purchased everybody out of it. But there was also like this really weird cutout that had been part of it for a while. So like if you look at the property, like the house is here. There's a pond right in the middle. And there's like a 5-acre cutout right on the other side of the property. And because of the language when it was left to us, that technically wasn't transferred to us. Because there's a nickname for this property, like a family nickname for it, and that's how it was referred to in these legal documents. And so when the attorney was handling like probate and all that stuff, handled it, they transferred this piece of property right here to my mother and my aunts. And then the rest of it, which was 77 acres, was transferred to the other 8 people. This, folks, is what we would call color of title. When there is some type of question of who should have gotten it, if there is some type of claim, if there's some title defect, if there's some kind of aspect like that, you only have to meet 7 years criteria. So here's what I'm getting at. I ended up buying all of this, which was 77 acres, and then there's this 5-acre cutout. And so if I would have just waited 7 years, I could have stolen that property from my mother and her sisters. I mean, that's all it would have taken. 7 years, and I could have stolen it because I would have what's called color of title. I could argue that I had some legal right to it, and because I was treating it as my, like, I could have stolen it. Now, obviously, that would not make Thanksgiving very pleasant, so I just wrote him a check, and I bought it. I wasn't happy about it, but I just bought it. So that would be color of title, right? Something to cloud the title, have a title defect, something to suggest that you may have some claim to it in some way, shape, or form. It's only 7 years you have to meet, not 20.